This day, our question of the day to you is, how are we taking care of the widows amongst us, especially in the face of the coronavirus pandemic? Well, remember, you can talk to us, that hashtag new normal, on any of our social media spaces. And of course, you can also call in or text in using that number at the bottom of your screen. For now, let's take a look at those numbers in as far as the effects of COVID-19 around the world. And so far, globally, that number stands at 9,188,362 people confirmed to have COVID-19. Thankfully, 4 million of those, 937,282, have recovered from the same. And unfortunately, we have lost 474,339 people to COVID-19 globally. Now, when you look at those numbers, the United States is still leading in the number of those confirmed to have COVID-19, those that have recovered, and also the total deaths. And it is followed by Brazil, Russia, India, and the UK in that order. We also have our own burden here in Kenya, and as you know, the government has been giving us an update of these numbers even as we go along. And remember, the numbers of those confirmed to have COVID-19 is nearing the 5,000 mark. So remember, be vigilant and follow the parameters laid out to ensure we all avert and flatten the COVID-19 curve. Now, a look at some of the stories that are headlining around the world and to do with the day that we are actually observing today. The government says it will establish a charitable trust fund that will cater for the welfare of the widows and families of police officers, who paid the ultimate price in line of duty. Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i assured the widows that their concerns will be a priority for the government. Matiang'i, who was speaking during the National Police Service and Kenya Prison Service inaugural memorial service, also unveiled a memorial monument in honor of the soldiers. The widows complained that they have been left in a destitute state since they were left without a substantial source of income, and the CS further warned insurance companies contracted by the government to provide premiums to the widows against taking advantage of their desperate situation. Now, the need for proper physical, financial, and mental well-being of the families was the main agenda.
Alafu na wengine wamesema pesa ni kidogo walizopewa zimeisha, maana kabla hata tujaanza yani zile pesa kuja kufuatilia kupewa, watu wengine walikopa madeni, ilikuja Nairobi na kurudi, ni long process, inachukua kama miaka miwili ndio mtu alipwe.
I know we've been doing something. We've been helping. I know we have frameworks and policies in place. But I have come here to tell you that we want to relook even that and start a system of addressing the families of our fallen police officers better than we have done in the past.
Now, no woman deserves to be abused because of her widow status. That is a message that Rosaline Orwa and her team at Rona Foundation want entrenched into a society that still practices brutal and retrogressive cultural beliefs that rob both widows and orphans of their rights. I sat down with Rosaline on Women Empower in 2015, and she shared her experience and the hope she now offers other widows. Rosaline Orwa was divorced at the age of 26 for being childless, then widowed at the age of 32.
So here I am with a very bad, heavy history and then getting widowed. So when I became a widow, what shocked me most was the reality of how many things I was being told not to do. And the women, even women who knew me, literally walking up to me and say, "Why did you kill him? I mean, you are carrying this..." They call it a name. You are a black sheep, but they call it like a very dirty name. I forget the name. There was also negotiations with my in-laws who was going to inherit me. In fact, there was cleansing.
Back in Nairobi, alone and grieving, she was able to meet other widows through her second-hand clothes business. And here they shared their experiences and offered each other support.
This was the story of so many women who did not even have, at least I had an income. But these women, so I ended up giving most of my stock away, you know. Endo uze, ukipata utanilipa, kama utani sawa. So that's how the program got shape. I would do medical camps. I would find widows with broken houses like what we have on the photo. Of course, social media again, I would take a photo, post it on social media and say, this is so-and-so, she's HIV positive, she has 3 children, please help me build a house. So through the network I created with Modern Widows Club and then the social media following, that's how I ended up building widow houses.
Rosaline, a cervical cancer survivor, has through the advocacy program raised the profile of widows at the national level through a network of widows that is Sauti ya Wajane Kenya, which has a membership of over 2 million widows.
Last year we petitioned Parliament and we managed to outlaw widow cleansing under Domestic Offences Bill. Even now with widow cleansing, even if we go to court now, we are working with Haki Mashinani, still, we will have to prove what is widow cleansing. So we need a full bill describing what is widow cleansing: eating human flesh, drinking concoction, sleeping with a dead body, shaving the hair. Nigeria passed a widowhood bill in 2001. Malawi is about to pass a full bill. Ghana amended their constitution in terms of disinheritance and put the word widow. In Kenya, nothing. All quiet.
Well, Rosalina actually gives us an idea of the shoes that widows in this country face or walk in even as they go through life and survive to cater for the children that they're left behind with. Now, today, as I said, is an International Widows Day, and we take time to take stock of their welfare. And to help us have this conversation, Jessica Oluoch joins us in studio. She is the Senior Programs Officer at Carelin and also an advocate of the High Court. Thank you for joining us. We also are joined by Samson Orao, who is a Senior Programs Officer, Women and Governance Team, that is at FIDA. And we are also joined by Patricia Acero Ochieng, who is not only a widow, but also champions the rights of widows and those living with HIV. And as I mentioned, Rosaline Oroy is also joining us on this conversation. She is a widow and also the founder of Rona Foundation, and Bishop Kasuku Kalolo, who is part of the Luo Council of Elders, and he brings in wisdom in as far as culture and traditional beliefs are concerned. Now, we shall be joined by also another member of this panel who will be joining us from Uganda. So looking forward to that. But before we get to it, let's start off with Jessica. This day is very, very important. Now, a day set aside to advocate for the rights of widows. Maybe you can tell us or describe the plight that widows face.
Thank you so much, Gladys. We do work with an organization that is called the Kenya Legal and Ethical Issues Network. And our main focus is health-related human rights. So for us, when we look at widows and the rights of widows, we look at it from a rights perspective. So when it comes to rights, you find that there are usually intersectional issues that affect widows. For example, you can have a lady who has been widowed, then she's affected or infected with HIV, then she's a woman with disability, then that means that she has a layer of issues that are affecting her as an individual. So she's likely to face aspects of discrimination, and the first thing for us is always to sensitize the community as a whole, for them to be able to recognize the rights of widows, because widows are discriminated simply because of their status of being a widow. So we sensitize the communities, but we do also sensitize the widows for them to also be able to recognize their rights, for them to be able to claim their rights. One of our challenges has always been the aspect of culture, because you find that in most communities in Kenya, we do have cultures that are retrogressive. And therefore, you find that when it comes to women's rights, it's something that people do shy about, and they feel that you need to have something that is additional in order for you to get a right. For example, if you're a widow, in certain communities, especially in the western parts of Kenya, they do expect that there has to be an association with a man. So for example, if you are widowed with the widows that we work with especially, is that when you die, then expect you to go through certain customs and traditions. And if you refuse to go through these customs and traditions, then now the only option you have is either to leave, because they do have the belief that if you stay in their home, then a taboo will befall them. And for you to be able to stay there, then you have to go through these customs. But now you find that most of the customs and traditions that we have, even in the Kenyan context, some of them have been modernized, in that they do not actually practice the customs as they were, and they do not practice them for their intent. And that's why we do find it very important to have elders who are the custodians of culture, to be able to help us to interpret culture in their right sense, and also for them to be able to apply the law. Because at the end of the day, once we eliminate discrimination, then access to justice is very important, because most of the issues that widows face, always at the end, for them to be able to get their right, they have to get access to justice, whether it's formal justice or informal justice system.
Okay, and even as we face this pandemic as the world, do you think this is something that is bound to exacerbate the situation the widows find themselves in?
Yes, because I think from the statistics we are seeing that more men are dying more than widows. And then we've also seen so many stories of people being discriminated because of COVID. We have had similar instances when it comes to widows, especially once they're widowed and once somebody knows their HIV status. I think the story shared by Rona Foundation really resonates, because most people now believe that you have a role to play in the death of their husband. And they use that as a disguise to be able to strip you off of your property rights, disregarding the laws that we have in Kenya that are really progressive as they are right now. But people at the community level want to stick to the cultures and want to use that to be able to put the widows down. But the problem is, even the same with the corona situation, you find that people do not have access to information. And therefore, if they do not have access to information, they're not able to wholesomely be able to claim their rights. And that creates a barrier for them to be able to access these rights.
Okay, now Samson, you join us representing the Federation of Women Lawyers. Are you hearing reports of widows who've already come out to say we are having a hard time surviving this pandemic?
Gladys, there are so many widows who are facing a lot of challenges today, going through a lot of disinheritance. COVID, as it is today, has brought a lot of challenges for Kenyans in general and globally, but more so for women. And when you see women being disempowered, women being disinherited of their land, women being kicked out of their land, COVID has created a series of widows. And so women are going through a lot of challenges with their children. A lot of them are unable to pay school fees because, look, this is a situation. Many of the women are unable to be economically empowered. Men usually have more economic means compared to women, and therefore when a spouse dies, this woman is left to the hands of the community. And just like the lady from Kellen has pointed out, it becomes a challenge then. So you'd find a situation where this man has got huge tracts of land, and then the women are now thrown out of this land by the man's relatives. We have seen cases of fathers-in-law turning against their daughters-in-law because the son-in-law had a lot of property and has passed on. And that becomes so much of a problem that, you know, the cases that we are receiving at the Federation of Women Lawyers today are cases that are just so heart-wrenching that you can't even begin dealing with them. And yes, we have progressive laws. Yes, we have a community that's more aware. Yes, we have a constitution that has provided for equal inheritance by both male and female children. But I think as a country, we still have a long way to go if the statistics that we see at FEDA are anything to go by.
Okay, and let's bring those that wear these shoes. And I'll start off with Rosaline. We had a sneak peek of your story, and you talked about being forced to undergo what you called widow cleansing. Please let us know what that is.
Thanks, Gladys. And as the lady from Kelina shared, traditional harmful, retrogressive harmful cultural practices are one of the major barriers in terms of widow rights. I was only 32 when I got widowed, and I remember the night, 4 nights after my husband had been buried, they brought in an Anyatiti playing man I thought, oh, they're entertaining us. But this was actually the cleanser, so it went on until later in the night. And so when I said, I'm so tired, it's been a long, weeks and weeks of arranging funeral, why don't this get over? And so they were pissed off, and there was a lot of commotion, and actually the fighting started from that day. I'm a childless widow, so there was an expectation perhaps I would sire children, name after him, because also increasing the family in terms of children, property, and all this associated with disinheritance of widows. It was at play, and nothing is innocent when it comes to cultural practices and beliefs. Nothing is innocent. The putting of the soil in the grave, nothing is innocent. Everything is calculated. It has a meaning. It is unspoken, and nobody prepares you for this. So that was my scenario, and resisting it meant I was defiant, and I was not going to conform, and therefore that was rebellious, unacceptable, and it didn't matter whether I had a choice and voice over my own body. Body autonomy is a big issue for widows, especially with illiteracy and poverty and HIV, and it exacerbates the spread of HIV and AIDS. So all these factors, at the time, I was not cognizant of really what was at play, but looking at it 12 years down the line, there was just that one moment I needed to make a decision, either to conform and be part of the missing statistics of widows across the globe, or to stand out and change the narrative, both for myself and other widows in this country. So it was tough at the time, widowed young, because when we talk about widows, again, Gladys, we are only not talking about, biblically, it's acceptable that they are 50, 60 years and above.
Yeah.
But here I was at 32, so we are talking about widows of all ages, widows who've lost their husbands. Lifespan in the region along Western Kenya, Lakeshore region, is about 36 for men. So we are talking about child widows, we are talking about teen widows, we are talking about young widows at 26. So we are talking about the rights of many, many women missing in that. The sin of omission is real on widows across this nation. Okay. Well, last year there was census taken, so we expect some data to come out. But that data may not even be true, because widows themselves did not disclose their full status, that I'm widowed because of maybe economic gains, arranged relationship, and all other factors that go with poverty and inequality.
Okay, now let's bring in Patricia. Patricia Acero, you are living positively with HIV, and this was one of the things that was actually used against you when your husband passed away. Tell us more.
Thank you so much, Gladys. I have a long story, but I know you have a short time. When my husband died in 1990, it started off immediately after the death, because there was a big expectation. I was working for an international NGO, and the first thing that was expected was that this NGO was to bring in a lot of money for the funeral. And that was not the case. The NGO had its own policy. So when this money did not come in, that is when everything started off. So all the money that was collected for the funeral, due to the illness that was going on, we really had debts. And some people in the funeral committee had proposed that these debts need to be cleared before the body was taken home, but that was never done. So when we got up country, and at the funeral, the widow speaks last before the burial. So I stood up and told everybody I was HIV positive, and I was not going to go through the process of wife inheritance because of my status. That time, there was no medication. It was 1990. We had not started taking antiretrovirals yet. And I said, if that was not going to, if they will not allow me to do that, then I had to live with my parents. And they said it was okay, there's no problem. In the Luo custom, it's a taboo for a man to be buried without a wife. So I think I was just being used without my knowledge that I was just serving a kind of a purpose. So after the burial, I came back to Nairobi. I had a lot of stuff, but then I came back to work. And after 1 year, I decided that I needed to do a memorial for my husband. So I put things in place, and my mother-in-law told me to ask my brother-in-laws for permission so that we could do the memorial. So there was a meeting, the family meeting. And that's the first time I was told that I was the one who had murdered my husband. Yet everybody knew that the guy had died of HIV. So that is how, that was the most painful part of it. That a woman is accused of murder. So when a man dies, he has to be murdered. So I murdered my husband. That was one of those things. It's 19 years, but it's still very painful. And because they said that, I said, okay, we'll not have that. If I'm the murderer and I'm just going to do these things because I want to bring in maybe a witch doctor to cleanse me, then let's forget about the memorial. The same time, my mother-in-law died, the same year. So when I went for the funeral, I was told there's a process. It's called care. Or it's like scattering after the funeral when people are leaving. It's a procedure that is done. And it seems like everything starts and ends up with sex. So after the burial, I was asked, who is there? Do you have a man who is going to help you in the process of care? And I said, which man? My husband died. I'm HIV positive. Which man are you asking me about? So it was a big thing. And the children who were sleeping in my house were told to get out because I was not going to participate in the ritual, and that would bring curses to the family. So my nephews and my niece were told to leave my house because now I'm not part of the family. And I was told to take my children and leave the home. So I left. I left after a few days after looking for money, so I had to leave the home because I could not participate in this care process. This scattering, because it's a procedure. After 4 days, it's the first son who leaves the house, then the second son, then the third. You are not living like it's like when you go out, you need to have this physical or sexual contact with somebody. So I didn't have anybody, so I was kicked out, so I left. And the pain of being told as a murderer was there. So at that time, I was not thinking issues land because I had a job, I was working. And come 1997, during the post-election violence, things were very bad in Nairobi. So I took my children, I was living with my sister, I took everything I had in my house and took them up country. My house was small, so I just rented a house in a shopping center just close to home so that I was thinking of extending my house. Just a few weeks later, my sister called and said, you know what, they're demolishing your house. I said, what? In the Luo custom, when a woman's house is demolished, that's a divorce. This woman is being divorced. So I really felt pain. It was like my husband had died all over again. I called my brother-in-law and said, you know what, Dad is demolishing my house. I don't know what the problem is. And he said, no, that can't happen. So they called home and it was confirmed that they had demolished the house. And the reason behind that was that I was being disinherited. I was being kicked out of that family because culturally I knew, my parents knew, that when a Luo woman's house has been demolished, whether they've removed the door or the window, you are being disinherited. Mm-hmm. So that is how I was disinherited in 1997, and it was very painful. Mm-hmm. I stepped aside for some time. As much as I knew the law, as much as I'm empowered, I had to step aside and think very clearly. You know what happened in 1997? People are being burned in houses.
Mm-hmm. Patricia, if you can still hear us. Patricia, if you can still hear us.
People are being burnt in...
I'll stop you at that point so that you can come back to tell us what exactly happened after that. And at this point, let me bring in Bishop Kasuku. And just listening to some of these stories, a lot is actually, or has a lot to do with tradition and culture. When you hear these widows talk about their experiences, is this the true definition of the Luo culture?
Thank you very much. I think I've heard that very well. And what I would like to say is that first and foremost, we need to know that widows are sisters, they are daughters, they are mothers, they are parents, they have all the rights to be who they are. And it is not because of them that the husbands passed away and left them alone. Many things have been said and done against the widows. This is not in line with the culture of the Luos. A lot of abuse has been done and a lot of mutilation has been done to our culture because most of these widows are being abused in the pretext that it is cultural. There is no culture that forces a woman to be inherited. There is no Luo culture that will force a woman to have another partner by force. That has never been had. Actually, when a husband dies and a woman remains and she is still in the marriageable age, it is her to choose whom she wants to stay with. If she does not want, she is not forced. And especially in this era of HIV and AIDS, no woman can be inherited by force. But a number of bad things have happened. Like I heard my sister here say that her house had to be demolished because she had refused to be inherited. I think that is very wrong. And it is an abuse to the Luo community. People who are practicing these things are evil, and what they are doing is not acceptable. The woman has all the rights to attain, to take care of her children, to take care of her family, to take care of everything else that remains. She has even property of the late husband to take care of. And she is the next of kin, and nobody should step around. And that is why we have come out as elders of the Luo, as Luo elders, to take charge and care of these widows who have been disinherited. We have managed to settle and resettle so many of them whose cases have been sent to us. And I would wish that this lady who has a problem comes around so that we help her. We have all the solutions to these things. We have done it over 300 widows have been settled and helped through our council of elders. And it is unfortunate. These things that we say are cultures of the Luos are not our culture. They are borrowed, they are evil, they are intended to take away the property from these widows. After the death of their husbands, the men who are hungry for money, who are hungry for wealth, will want to take advantage of these women, take their land, take their property, take whatever has been left around by their late husbands. And we don't accept this at any rate. Even the Constitution does not accept it. And human rights do not accept this. That is the much that I want to say.
Yes.
That the culture of the Luos is that when a woman dies, it is accepted that she can take another marriage. Another marriage she can take willingly and willfully, not forced. And if that happens, it is a ceremony and people are very happy about it. But in the case where people's houses are demolished, where children are sent away, where a woman is sent away because people allege that she's the one who caused the death of her husband, it is unacceptable, it is ungodly, and we condemn it very, very highly.
Now, Bishop, will come back to you so that you can explain to us how it is that you do the reconciliation for such widows and orphans in society. And I'll come back to you, Jessica. I mean, somebody could be listening to this and wondering, does this only happen in the western part of the region? From your experience across the country, what is the experience?
I think from our experience, way back in... we have had partnership with the judiciary, and the judiciary works on a countrywide basis. So we realize that when it comes to disinheritance, people take away the property without any regard to the woman, right? And people actually do not recognize that this is actually an offense, and it's a criminal offense. That is actually the aspect of intermeddling. So if somebody dies, then you're supposed to be able to get access to the property through courts. So for us, we have always found it very important to be able to have partnerships with the people who are the duty bearers. So last year we had a partnership with the judiciary for us to be able to highlight the kind of processes that happen within the courts for the widows to be able to access their rights, and that is with regard to the process of succession. So we developed informative, educative materials for people to be able to understand the succession process. And since then, we have realized that there's so many widows from all over the country who are not able to access their property, or the property that they have is still in the name of the deceased. And that's why we have so many cases of women being disinherited, the grabbing of property. And I think for a very long time, we've had so many cases in the western parts of Kenya because that is the area where we're working in. But then after that, we've had cases in Central, and we've had cases even in Nairobi, we've had cases in Nakuru, and in so many areas. And then you realize that this is the story all over the country.
Yes.
Women are being disinherited, nobody is doing anything about it, they're having disregard to the law, and they're not even allowing these women to be able to have the right to dignity at the same time. So it's a countrywide problem, and there's need for us to be able to have a wholesome solution to it with working with the duty bearers.
Okay, now Samson, how does it look like beyond the western part of this country from the lenses of FIDA?
It's more or less like what Jessica has said. We have seen cases of some areas like in Rift Valley, where before somebody would pick up a rungu, you know, you take your son and you pick up a rungu and throw that rungu as far as that rungu will land, and then your son inherits that land. And so when this son now comes and passes on, it becomes a challenge then where these women are disinherited and they are unable to, you know, take use of this land. That becomes very problematic. We have also seen instances where this woman has been tilling this land for 20 years with her children, and then all of a sudden, families come up, brothers-in-law come up, strangers come up. Sometimes even the land is sold without the widow being aware that that land has been sold. And so one moment you see people moving in with fences, you know, with ballast and construction materials, and armed gangs of youth, and evicting this widow from there. So we've seen these cases of widows being disinherited from all over the country. FIDA has put up various mechanisms working with duty bearers. We have partnered a lot with the judiciary as well, and just engaging in these processes to ensure that women can still achieve their rights. And of course, FIDA having been here for the past 35 years, you can imagine the number of cases that we've been receiving over the years, where women come in and it's always one issue or the other. I was beaten up and chased out of the home. You know, my late husband's brother sold the land without me being aware, and these issues just become very problematic.
Okay, now, Rosalind, I'll come back to you. It sounds like a lack of information or just general awareness of the rights of widows is the first place we need to shed light on. In your case, what did you have to do to get what was due to you back?
Gladys, even just listening to the whole conversation, you can see the discrepancies, you can see the gaps. In my case at that time, first of all, I was when your husband dies, fear grips in, shame, guilt, accusations, all this, and you're dealing with loss and grief, you're dealing with trauma. So it's a bad time to actually take a woman through that whole process. Where will you live? What will you protect? What will you lose? Who is stigmatizing you? Who will cleanse you? Who will inherit you? Actually, cleansing is the first part. Wife inheritance comes later when you've been cleansed of the omen of death. So I was caught up. My pillar at that time was my mother, who had been widowed and who had stood against the practice. But if I did not have my mother, I perhaps wouldn't have survived it. And my father-in-law is a pastor, also came in handy and said, you have a right to make a choice if you want to, you know, how you want to live, what you want to do, and whatever property you had. And I had to still make some losses in between. I actually lost a prime piece of land in that whole process. So looking at all that, and maybe in my case, I had a support system. A lot of the widows that we work with in Siaya County don't even have a support system. Even the families, their birth families, are also pushing for these practices to happen. And I love what the bishop there has said, that they condemn. But I'm one of those people who believe the Luo Council of Elders, I'm sure even the Njurin Cheke, they don't have an office. They don't have a place where you go to petition and put your case on the table. So we cannot be all, you know, looking for them when cases come up. And cases are here every single day of our lives. So how about just having a law to outlaw these harmful cultural practices, to give these women their right and dignity? What stops a law from, you know, we are to outlaw FGM, what stops outlawing widowhood cultural practices? I see no reason. But it starts with change of attitude. It starts with increased awareness, and it starts with people knowing more about it. It starts with the church taking the conversation to till death do us part. When you get married, do you know what will happen when death do you part? So it's more about educating, creating awareness, and increasing and enlarging spaces where such conversations can take place.
Okay, now Patricia, you said you knew your rights, but at that point you were not strong enough to pursue what was owed to you. Did that eventually happen?
I need to clarify a few facts. When this issue of widow experience really takes me far off. My husband died in 2000, and my house was demolished in 2007 during the post-election violence. So I took off and bought myself land in Migori because I'm married in Homa Bay. But after some time, I didn't come back. And the reason I came back is also some people also attacked me where I was in Migori and also burnt my house down when I had gone to train some people on HIV in Bungoma. So my place was also burnt down. When you are a widow and you are a woman and you even buy land, you can also lose it. I didn't lose the land in Migori, but I lost my property and my house in Migori. So I came back. There was a funeral at home and I came back. And after the funeral, one of our uncles had died. So I spoke to my father-in-law and my brother-in-laws were in. So I said, as a wife and a widow of that home, my father-in-law had no right to disinherit me because he's not my husband. Unless my husband comes back from the death and sends me away, I was not leaving. I wanted a place to build myself a house, to take care of my husband's grave and to stay where he left me because I'm not leaving. So the issue of the murdering my husband came back again, and I defended myself strongly because I had healed a bit. And I had also gone under intensive training by Kelin, and I was also now strong for myself. Even when you are strong, at times you need a shoulder to lean on, and that is where Kelin comes in and the other champions as well. So I defended myself, and I was told to wait. So I was in the home for the whole day, and I was told in the evening, yes, we can give you somewhere to construct a house. So later on, I was told where I could construct. It's about a piece of like 50 by 100. I said, it's okay. But because at this period now I was not working, I've not been working for some years because I was very sick for some time and I lost my contract where I was working with the NGO. But my husband, my father-in-law passed on, and now the grandchildren, one of the grandchildren brought in money and they constructed me a house, a two-roomed house. So now I'm back in the home. And because those young children who are there are now even grown, my kids are also big, but I only have that portion where I'm living. I don't have a place to dig or a shamba where I can get products, but at least I'm there now.
Okay.
I'm back in the home and I have a house.
Okay, at least it ended well for you, albeit later on in the process. And Bishop Kalolo, at this point, land and inheritance is such a huge issue here. From the Luo Council of Elders' point of view, how is it that what do you do to ensure that these widows actually get what is owed to them? Bishop Kalolo, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, and I was asking, what does
what we do?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, what we do as Luo Council of Elders is to give direction and guidance. And the law is very clear. Article 159 2C talks to us about the rights of the elders to sort out issues. And where there are problems, where there are disputes, we always come in and assist. For this lady and others may be suffering because they do not know that there is an avenue through which they can get help. And I want to also say that when you look at the law, Constitution Article 60 talks about land and equitable access, security of land, rights. For all widows, they have got that security. And it is important that they contact the right people. We have done mediation in very many cases such as this, where an abuse has been done. And we have seen that a lot of solutions have been done. So I would like to say that almost in every area, we have got members of the Law Council of Elders who can assist and help our widows so that they don't get astray and suffer. It is unacceptable. We have the Constitution on our side. We have our culture also on our side. We also have the Bible, which is assisting us in very many ways. So a woman has all the rights to really take charge and care of what is left behind from a husband.
Now, Bishop, let me ask, on behalf of Rosalind, she asked a question that the Law Council of Elders, the jury checkers of Meru County, they don't necessarily have an office you can walk into. So if a widow has something they'd like to share with the council, how do they reach you?
Oh, they can reach us through our contacts. We have got our telephone numbers, and all the times we have had them contacting us.
Where can we get these numbers?
Physical offices as such, but we have got Council of Elders, which sits periodically and everywhere. All our districts, we have got Council of Elders, and we can also be contacted through our organization. If anybody calls upon our Law Council, they will always find access to us.
So are you saying, do you have like a website? I mean, how do we get these numbers you talk about?
Oh, the numbers. You can get my number, and you can also get, through my number, I can access, I can direct that woman or that fellow, that widow, to the right elder in her place. And we have done that in the past very, very successfully.
Okay, thank you, Bishop. Now back to you, Jessica. I think we've talked about the rights, and especially when it comes to the right to land, right to property, right to inheritance. In 2013, we actually, as a country, signed off the Matrimonial Property Act. 2013, many years later, women are still struggling. What is a gap?
I think, as I said initially, that we have had a very progressive constitution that recognizes the equality between men and women. And it's the constitution that mandated the enactment of other laws, the Matrimonial Property Act, the Marriage Act, to be able to align to the Constitution of Kenya 2010. But there's so many factors that come into play. For example, when it comes to matrimonial property, it's supposed to govern the property that you have within the marriage, right?
Yes.
So it says that both parties to a marriage are equal before the marriage, during the marriage, and after the marriage. But we've had so many cases in court where we are having aspects of distribution of property. So this is before widowhood. When we are having cases of divorce, separation, then we have aspect of distribution of property. And the question has always been, what the aspect of contribution, what role does that have to play within a marriage? Because last year we had this conversation the entire last year and the year before, where when it comes to contribution, what amounts to contribution? And when you talk about contribution relating to women, then what factors need to be put into consideration? Because there's that general perception that when you are in a marriage, you know that women have other roles to play. For example, childbirth, they will be taking care of the family. And sometimes you have families that opt for the woman to be able to stay at home. So when it comes to divorce, then you find that this woman is disadvantaged, because when they ask you about contribution, according to the law as it is, the Matrimonial Property Act, then there is the aspect for you to be able to prove contribution. How you are able to prove contribution is by bank statements, money that you sent, title deed, the land that you bought, the sale agreements that you have with people, and you find that women cannot be able to produce that because they have been playing more of a supportive role. And therefore, this is a question where we say, then what is this equality within the marriage, during the marriage, and after the marriage? And if that is what is outlined in the Constitution, and when it comes to practice, when it comes to matrimonial property, then you expect women to be contributing, and for them to be able to prove this contribution, then it becomes some sort of a thin line because women remain disadvantaged. And that has always been a question with regard to the constitutionality of that section. But that being left aside, when it comes to widowhood, the law that governs issues relating to property of a person who has died, that is the husband, is supposed to be the Law of Succession Act. So this is the law that clearly outlines that when a spouse dies, if the husband dies, then the wife has the highest interest in terms of the property that they have within the marriage, and vice versa. So it means that there's a degree of rights that people have. For example, you come from the wife, and then you go to the children. Both male and female children have equal rights, and then is when you go to the parents of both the man and the woman, and then like that up to down. But when it comes to cases of death, people disregard the law of succession, and the person who has the highest right is discriminated. And people who, second cousins, third cousins, and other in-laws will come in and say, when it comes to parcels of land, and now is when they will invoke culture and say that as men in this family, we are holding it with this family, because if we give you land, you're going to sell it as a woman. Because they have that perception, because people usually say that when you're married into a home, sometimes you are not, they feel that if they give you that parcel of land, you might sell it, so they want to keep it within the sons of the family, in order for the sons to give the sons and the sons to give the son. But you see, this is not going according to the Law of Succession Act, which gives the woman the highest interest. And even addressing Patricia and Rose's issue is, when that happens, then if you do the process of succession and you go through the right process, which is supposed to be court, then the court will make sure that if there was a will that was left by the deceased, then that will be followed. But if there is no will, then it means that the court has to put in aspect of equality, non-discrimination, put in the Law of Succession Act. And one thing that people forget is that within a marriage, women also contribute. Women also have parcels of land within this marriage. But when the man dies, the presumption is that all the property belongs to the man, and therefore we need to divide all of them. So when you go through the right process, which is supposed to be court, they're going to bring in all people who are supposed to be the dependents of the deceased, and they're going to take into consideration aspects of gender, aspects of equality, and ensure everyone gets their right to property. But then, unfortunately, we have people who cannot be able to access courts because maybe they do not have money, they don't know which step to do, and that's why we have the Council of Elders. And I know it has been mentioned that people don't know where to find elders. You just hear that they're elders, they resolve disputes. Kasuku has mentioned numbers, but then now you're like, where are these numbers? How do you find them? What has worked for us as an organization that is trying to make access to justice for the most vulnerable is that at the community level, we're trying to create networks. So for example, if you have widows such as Patricia, she's a widow champion. We'd call her a widow champion because she's gone through the process. She has been able to get back her land, and now she's sensitizing other women. So you see, if that woman exists in a certain community, then she already understands her rights, and she's able to identify other women who are also violated, right? So this woman, if she went through the whole aspect of mediation, which is also recognized in the Constitution, as the elder mentioned in Article 159, where traditional justice system is recognized as a form of dispute resolution mechanisms, and those decisions should be respected. So when we have cases at the community level, how it works for us is, for us, we have the widow champions who identify the widows, and then they refer them to the elders within that specific sub-county. So we work within sub-counties. So we have widow champions, and then we have the elders within that sub-counties. And then the elders who usually resolve these cases are the elders from the matrimonial home where you were married, because that is where the property is. And how they do it is they hear your end of the story, they have conversations with you, they hear your in-laws or whoever it is that has taken the property from you, they hear their end of the story, and then they have a common meeting where everyone speaks out their story, says why they have a right to this property, in these modern times, you're allowed to produce title deeds, you're allowed to produce site certificate, whatever document you feel is necessary.
Okay.
But the good thing about the elders is the ones that we work with have been trained on both the law and the culture. So they already have the culture, but they do understand the law that women also have a right to property, and they document their cases. And we do have compendium of cases where we say, this number of cases have been resolved, and these were the issues, these were the facts, in order for us to be able to understand what are the kind of cases that are resolved by the elders. And lastly, there is that aspect of that was mentioned with regard to traditional justice system. There is no formula. Elders just do it informally. I know the judiciary is in the process of developing an alternative justice system policy that is supposed now to be able to guide this process. If elders are supposed to sit, how are they supposed to sit? And how are their decisions supposed to be recognized? Because sometimes we have decisions and then people go back on them and there's nothing you can do. So we are in the process of making sure that we do have a policy that respects and recognizes the decisions that have been made by the elders.
Okay,